I am your father.
How fun is that? I love upgrading my podcasting gear, and now I've got this really cool voice changer sound effects thing. Anyways, today I was joined by Gabe Shapiro, who's like a law legend in the space. I feel like I always say the same stuff. Yeah, he's been around for a long time. No, but he really has been around for a long time. Gabe started off as like a up and coming M&A lawyer, and then while working on the WhatsApp acquisition by Facebook, got turned on to the idea of encrypted technology, and then like just deep dive into cryptography, and is a self-proclaimed decentralization maxi, and is working to build some really cool infrastructure for the crypto legal space. Other than that, he's just a very cool, outspoken guy, very smart, very opinionated. I really enjoyed this episode with him, and I hope that you will too. Welcome to Beyond the Code, the podcast where industry experts and brilliant legal minds discuss the impact of new emerging technologies. I'm your host, Yitzy Hammer, a lawyer and tech enthusiast. Join us as we explore the legal, regulatory, and ethical issues surrounding AI, blockchain, and more. Get ready to go beyond the code and stay ahead of the game. Dude, you are tough to pin down, like not responsive and just like difficult to get, but I'm happy to have you here. So thank you.
Sorry about that. Yep.
No, it's okay. I mean, I guess you're a busy guy. You are like one of the most, I'd say, like famous lawyers in the space. Like you've been in the space for a while. You're very vocal. You always go against the grind, or almost always go against the grind, and you're like not scared to back up your opinions, which I absolutely love. You put out great content, and it's always fun watching you get into a riff with somebody. So very, very honored and happy to have you here with me today.
Yeah, man. And sorry for putting you through the ringer to make this happen. Yeah, just a lot of
No,
stuff.
It makes it all the more
We'll
worthwhile.
talk about all that.
Yep. So you're like, we've never met. I've never chatted with you, but your name comes up always everywhere. So I feel like we know one another.
Likewise.
I know a lot about what you're doing nowadays with like MetaLex, but not very much about your past. I mean, I know certain parts of your past, but like you're not your distant past. So why don't you just like, for the benefit of anybody else listening, give me a little bit of background as to like, who is Gabe Shapiro?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm just a boy from New Jersey, really, but
whereabouts? I'm also from New Jersey.
A small town called Metuchen, which is actually about 2 miles long, and its main claim to fame is that the magician David Copperfield is from there.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But I've had, I don't know, like a 15-year legal career now-ish, not counting law school. And I started my career really probably at one point I was one of the top associate talents in the tech M&A world in big law.
Okay.
I had a strange series of events where I took a 1-week class with then Vice Chancellor Leo Strine of the Delaware Chancery Court, eventually became Chief Justice of the Delaware Supreme Court. And for whatever weird reason, he took a shine to me. And that meant that I sort of had a like very prematurely specialized legal career in buy-side tech. So I really did that at a very high level for like 7 years. What happened is that I was the senior associate on the Facebook WhatsApp deal on the Facebook side, which was a crazy deal because it literally happened over a Valentine's Day weekend from Mark Zuckerberg, like ambushing the founder at like his Valentine's dinner or something like that. And one of the big selling points of that deal at the time was end-to-end encryption, right? It was really a user acquisition play, but I guess they felt obliged to have a tech narrative around it as well, right? And that was WhatsApp's tech claim to fame is end-to-end encryption. So I started, because of that deal and, just how stratospheric it was, I got interested in looking into end-to-end encryption. And this led to...
Just place me, like what year was that?
I think that deal was 2016, 2015. It was either early 2016 or late
2017 maybe.
So anyway, so little by little, I mean, I literally was like reading textbooks on cryptography and stuff. I just kind of got nerd sniped, and that led me into reading about crypto. Now, this must have been 2014 or 2015 ish. That led me into reading a bit about Bitcoin and stuff like that. And literally, when I read about smart contracts, it was one of those like Saul on the road to Damascus type moments, because I was like, well, we do escrows on M&A deals all the time, and this is basically an escrow without an escrow agent. I was like, this could be huge, right? I mean, you don't need you don't need this intermediary anymore, and that to me really ignited my interest in crypto. I just started going to Ethereum meetups at the time, and yeah, I just really got nerd sniped by it, to the point where like basically in 2017 kind of ICO era, I hooked up. Lewis Cohen happened to be at my law firm, and he was also getting into crypto. So we started doing a little bit of crypto work sort of on the side, much to the chagrin of my my M&A rabbis. And by the time they were ready to offer me to join the partnership program, I literally quit the next day to go join a consensus. At the time, they were calling them spokes, but basically a consensus portco called Grid Plus as their GC. And then, things just kept leading one to the other. And, I ended up becoming a crypto lawyer.
One of the first self-proclaimed crypto lawyers, no?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah. And I started, one of the first things I did is start a chat called Hardcore Crypto Law, where I would add other crypto lawyers to, and the whole point, the reason why it's called hardcore was like, let's really debate things. And, that's probably the biggest crypto lawyer social hub, I would say. Yeah.
Does that still exist, that chat?
Oh yeah, that still exists. Not only does it exist, it has had multiple contentious hard forks.
Where does it live? Is it a
Telegram
chat?
Telegram, yeah.
Okay,
obviously it's invite only and all that stuff, but yeah, it's good fun.
Okay, so for all those listening, you're not invited.
You could be invited, Yitzy. You definitely qualify.
Very cool. Okay, wait. So that's kind of how you fell into crypto, and then I'm sure there was like multiple stages within crypto, as like just because you're always hating on everybody. So like, right. What?
I did the Grid Plus thing for a while. Their play was they were trying to be a literal energy retailer in Texas, but they also had done an ICO and were trying to have a crypto wallet, and it was going to be like basically you pay in real time with your crypto wallet for your energy. It's kind of a cool early payments idea. And it ended up being that there just wasn't, once I got them set up, I was like, oh, there's just not that much for me to do here, right? And so I started looking for, they were cool. I liked them a lot. Now they're just a wallet company, really. But
I was going to say, like, it's just a very fringe use case. Like, it theoretically could have just been used, same infrastructure for general payments.
That's right. But we did literally start a Texas energy retailer, which was kind of interesting. And then later when they sold it, I was also the M&A attorney for their sale.
Full circle.
Yeah, exactly. So then I just started, actually by then Lewis Cohen had left our law firm and had started a boutique. So I went to work for them for a while. And then I actually wanted to start a tokenized security project. So I left and started trying to build that, but we couldn't get funding. And then I was offered, and although this time I would have little, crypto clients of various kinds, just doing certain things, it kept me going. And then Atrium, which was like billed as a law tech hybrid startup founded by Justin Kahn, the founder of Twitch, they reached out to me and I kind of wanted to get out of crypto at that point. This was like late 2019. I was just jaded on it. And, people, it was either like people wanted to do obviously illegal ICOs. They're just, and even that there was, that was a bear market. 2019 was a bear market. Right. So, at this point I was thinking, well, maybe I go back to M&A. Right. And they wanted me to head their M&A practice. So they hired me to do that. I moved back to San Francisco from Miami.
You went back to the same firm?
It was this firm Atrium, right? It was
okay. Oh, Atrium was a law firm.
Yeah, they were a hybrid tech company and law firm funded by A16Z and some other big thing.
Okay.
And they flew me out there. They moved me out there. All this stuff. I'm like, okay, back in the Bay Area, back in Silicon Valley, and literally 2 weeks later they shut down. And so I was like, oh my God, man, this is just nightmare. So what I did, started doing crypto law. And then of course, DeFi summer took off. And then suddenly I had this, massively successful privates, are quite successful for me. By my standards, it was doing really well as a solo guy. Hired an associate and stuff like that, and just kept going. And once I got rich off that, I was like, well, what next? And then like Delphi Labs recruited me, to come start basically be their GC to incubate a bunch of DeFi apps and stuff like that. So I did that for quite a while, and then they incubated what's my current project, MetaLex, and so now you're all caught up. Yeah.
Okay, but let's drill down a little bit. MetaLex came out of a realization of yours that like the DAOs as they're currently envisioned and structured just doesn't work, right? I remember when you came out with that article, I think it was like when you were still at DLX, maybe, or was maybe co-written with DLX, proposing the idea of the Borg.
Yes. Well, I was still with
that,
Delphi. I was with Delphi at the time.
With Delphi.
Published under Delphi.
Right.
Yep.
But that was basically like your, I guess, like your white paper for MetaLex, right?
Yeah, basically, yeah. So basically what happened was like when I was advising a lot of DeFi projects at Delphi, I had been sort of a decentralization maxi. And decentralization, a lot of lawyers in the space you probably found are decentralization maxis because it happens to dovetail very well with legal strategies, right? Your client doesn't have any responsibility and all this stuff, right? And what would happen was actually the more I got into weeds with founders and the better I understood how these systems work under the hood, I realized that was impractical idealism, really. And even the founders themselves didn't want to do that. They're like, no, man, this could get hacked. If it gets hacked, we need to be able to intervene, as a team and stop it.
I always find that first conversation with founders when it's like, are you gonna have governance? You're not gonna have governance. People always start with like, I want a DAO. Okay, do you actually know what that means? And then they start talking about taking profits home. Like, whoa, dude, like, it's not your money, it's their money. So like, there's definitely like a lot of people who think that they want a decentralized protocol don't understand what the ramifications
or vice versa. I would say, to me, more of the surprise I was getting was like, during the heyday of DeFi summer and stuff like that, people were kind of reflexively wanting DAOs, but there ended up being kind of a new arc a bit after that, where I was getting a lot of founders who were like, we don't want a DAO, and here's why, right? Or like, why are you making us do all these DAO votes? They're very annoying and we need to move faster, right? And so, I from being in contact with founders, I was kind of dragged to the realization of there needs to be pockets of centralization, right? And number one, a lot of times these were unwrapped. These are just like, we have a multisig. It's the multisig. It's the security multisig. Yeah, it can stop the protocol. It can upgrade the protocol. It can do these things, right? And I'm like, okay, let's work on this. Like, can we put this in an entity, number one, so you have limited liability? Can the entity have certain rules about how it's supposed to use its administrative powers? And could we actually limit on chain what it can do, right? So that you can actually say, hey, not only are we not abusing our powers because we're honest, but like literally we can't abuse our powers, or it's, there's very limited powers that we could abuse. And so what I began to realize from these conversations is there was a gap in the market, right? It needs to be a combination of legal and tech that work together to strike a new trust balance between developers and communities and users. I'd say developers, investors, and users, put it that way, sort of a pyramid, and that someone needed to build this, right? So I decided I would build it. And the construct of how to build it was this cybernetic organization, or Borg, that is a legal entity that has rules about using certain smart contracts. And we do that legal, and we also build the smart contracts, right?
Okay. So for like the non-tech savvy people, explain what that actually means. What is cybernetic, and how would this work in practice?
Well, cybernetics is basically, it's a little bit of an old field, but the idea behind it was feedback loops that combine machine interfaces with human interfaces, right? So there's a whole lore here about Nick Land and Norbert Wiener. It's a certain intellectual milieu, so to speak. But at the end of the day, it's all about checks and balances between systems and humans, right? So like the classic robot, someone has a robot arm, right? That's cybernetics. That's a cybernetic prosthesis. And it's relying on, the human brain giving feedback to the robot arm in a constant
and vice versa.
And that is the same idea between the humans and the autonomous systems with Borgs, right? Is that, the humans are getting checked and balanced by the technology, and the technology is in turn getting checked and balanced by the humans. So in practice, what that would do, let me just give you a hypothetical Borg, right? A DAO adjacent one, since we started off talking about DAOs. It could be a grants Borg, right? So the DAO has decided it needs a team of humans to give little incubator grants or, fire starter grants, whatever you want to call it.
Wait, and when you say the DAO, you mean like a DAO in its traditional form with like a
Yes,
foundation,
token voting, on-chain treasury, that
governance
holds a bunch
protocol.
of
Okay.
valuable tokens, right? They want to give some of those tokens to a group of humans to decide, hey, let's give $150,000 to this team. They're building something cool in our ecosystem, that sort of thing, right?
So the Borg would be set up as like a micro DAO, so to speak,
Um,
just
I
like
would,
to
I
fulfill a
wouldn't,
certain function.
well, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that, but let's just say this is I'll get into the design, right? But so the DAO wants to fund a group of humans to do these grants, let's say, right?
Mhm.
So the question is, how do we do that? Obviously, from the DAO's point of view, there's a risk that you're basically giving a bunch of money to a bunch of people. They could rug you, right? They could steal the money, or they could be honest actors. They could also just be bad at their job. They could make bad picks of who to fund and so on, right? From the people who are setting up this grants committee, they have a different problem, right? They're putting a lot of effort into this. They're putting their name on the line. They don't want the DAO to just like control all the money and they have to make a new governance request every time. It would be too slow. They could, put in a lot of work and then ultimately it turns into nothing.
Yeah,
And
they're committing to building on your chain.
exactly, right. And so there's these mutual trust problems, right?
Mhm.
So, and then there's also liability for this grants committee of they're handling money. If it's presented the wrong way, it could be seen as some kind of money services business or VASP, or it could be seen as a fund, like they're a fund manager for the DAO or something like that, right? There's many potential issues. So you need a set of strategies to navigate these trust issues and these regulatory issues, right? And so my approach to that, one approach is one you sort of were getting at, which would be what we call a sub DAO, right?
Okay.
Where like basically the DAO, like you just spawn off a smart contract, the DAO sends money there, but the DAO can revoke that money at any time, and it can add and remove anyone it wants from that sub DAO freely, right? So like basically the DAO is in total control. It's like having a company having a wholly owned subsidiary, right? The problem with that, I mean, there's a few problems, but number one, it doesn't solve the trust problem of the people who are in the sub DAO, where they can get rug pulled at any time from all the work that they put in, right? Like typically, like someone hires you at a company, yeah, it's at will employment, but they face breakage. They face like liability costs if they fire you unfairly, right? And then even if you're like a really high level person, you might have a severance agreement or other kinds of protections, right? Generally, it's not so one sided where people can just totally rug you after you've invested a lot into something. And so it's a problem of, it doesn't solve that trust problem. It solves the DAO's trust problem because they can yank at any time, right? But it's not mutual. The other problem is, of course, regulatory, right? And legal, right? Because if the DAO is fully in control of this, then the DAO, if the grants multisig does something bad, or that grants committee does something bad, the DAO may have liability for it, right? And the DAO is lots and lots of people and lots of places, lots of legal attack surface area. So what we like to do instead is we like to have a DAO adjacent entity, right? It's at arm's length from the DAO, and it has checks and balances relationships with it, but it's nothing like a subsidiary of the DAO. It's the way we would typically do it is we'd have a memberless beneficiary list, Cayman Islands Foundation, so there's no owners, right? And the nice thing about this is because it is ownerless, there's no default duties, there's nothing like stockholders, and you can put any rules you want into that entity. So you can very specifically say the only purpose of this entity is to give out grants that are like materially likely to like drive value to this particular token or drive users to this particular set of smart contracts, however you want to define it, right? And then automatically, whoever works for that entity, their sole duty is to fulfill those very narrow purposes, right? And what we would say is, okay, this entity owns a multisig, right? These people are on this multisig, and then you would have a rule in the thing that all business has to be conducted through this multisig. The multisig has to own these funds. Every vote, every action of the entity has to be voted by majority of the multisig or 3 of 6.
Members of the foundation also have access to the multisig?
That's
like
right.
signatory
Everyone,
rights?
it would be like 1-to-1 in a frequent case. Like everyone who's on the multisig must be part of the foundation. Everyone who's part of the foundation must be part of the multisig. So there's it's like an SPV that just wraps.
And is the entity reusable for multiple purposes? I'm just thinking like on the cost side of things. Like if I had to set up a Cayman entity each time I wanted to do this.
Yeah, I mean, we've had some, I'm giving the ideal one right now. There are ones that sort of wrap multiple multi-sigs and stuff like that for cost savings reasons, as you say.
I mean,
but I'm going to give the ideal.
Expensive.
Yeah, I'm going to give the ideal, right? So the ideal is that, it's very narrowly purposed, one entity, one multi-sig, all that. And then what you would have is, instead of, you want to still have some on-chain checks and balances with the DAO, because of course, let's just say in our scenario, the DAO is not a legal entity. It's just a smart contract, right? So it's not like you can just have some contract between this entity and the DAO. Instead, they have to be able to do stuff on chain. So what we would typically do is a check and balance dynamic, something like the following. Any membership change in this entity, it has to be approved both by the existing membership of the entity and by the DAO, right? Or there could be, you could imagine a spending rate limitation that's programmed into the multi-sig smart contract. Like you can, let's just say it's supposed to be a 2-year budget that they're supposed to be doing these grants. You can enforce that programmatically, that they can only spend the money that fast, right? And then if they need to go faster, that could be either time locked and subject to a DAO veto, or it could require DAO co-approval, right, to override the limitations. So this is just one application. Obviously, you could do grants Borgs, you could do security Borgs, you could do a lot of different things. But this is roughly how the legal structuring and the checks and balances are.
And again, it's a subsidiary of the foundation.
No. This would just be a foundation entity that.
No, so you have a foundation, and then the foundation would set up this new entity.
No.
In what?
Just one entity, right? There's just a DAO, an unincorporated DAO. Just in this scenario, again, many different ways you could do this.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to understand if this would be a good replacement for like the standard structure with the foundation of the service company, right? Where you have like a team of founders that come and they want to build a protocol. And they want it to be decentralized, but they also want to retain tokens and they want to get paid. And so they set up the foundation and they set up their service company, and then they want to make sure that the foundation doesn't vote them out. So they have some, they try to put together some kind of an agreement that locks them in for X amount of years and Y amount of money and gives them a whole bunch of tokens. And like, there's so much involved with like painting that picture and making sure that it's like stays the same color that you initially painted it, that like, would this be a good alternative?
Yes,
to that model?
That wasn't the hypothetical I was painting, but you can imagine the same type of logic being used in that context, right? Like it also you can use this to manage trust issues between a labs company and a foundation company in a very similar way to how you can use it to manage trust issues between a DAO and a grants council, right? It's all the same type of technology and like legal techniques.
Okay, so what's the innovation and the tech associated with this?
Yeah, on the tech side, what we've built on the tech side, as far as Borgs go, I mean, there's another whole angle to our business, which is like tokenized securities and stuff.
Give it to me, man. I want to hear.
But on the Borg side, the whole mission of MetaLex, right, is to put entities on chain, right? And entities run a continuum. There are DAO type of entities and foundations, and then there's like venture-backed companies with like stock and all that, right? We're trying to put all of it on chain with the same tech stack. But briefly speaking, in the area we were talking about, the tech innovation is to take standard Gnosis safes, or they used to be called Gnosis safes. Now they're just called multi-sigs. And that protocol has hooks that are called guardians and modules. So this is already built into that safe protocol that you can add extra logic into it.
Okay.
Our technology suite in terms of these multi-sigs is a set of guardians and modules that connects up a multi-sig with some other organization. Could be a DAO, could be another multi-sig, could be another smart contract, and basically modifies it. So what you have is membership management suite for a multi-sig. You can make that as programmable as you want. You can have different voting rules and roles within the multi-sig, right? So like basically like imagine just one task would be, how can we mirror a board of directors on chain, right? For any entity type, right? Think about the board of directors. You have certain roles on it, like a chairman. Sometimes you have a board observer role, right? And sometimes you might have a secretary that has certain duties. So you can change, instead of just, oh, this is a multi-sig, 4 of 6 approves any action. You could say it requires, 3 guys plus the chairman to approve an action, right? And then just like stockholders can elect and remove board members, but board members also can have influence over that. You could say some set of tokens can elect and remove people from this multi-sig, or them plus a majority of the other signers, right? So basically, you can mirror almost any type of corporate governance arrangement using our technology.
Okay, very cool. So that's on the tech side.
Yeah.
And then there's obviously like the mission statement aspect of just trying to bring everything on chain. And then also you guys are a law firm of sorts.
Yeah, we're I'd say that activity has gone down in our second year. We're currently in our second year.
Okay. No
Early
timer?
on, like basically like what happened was like we spent a year on R&D, and in the meantime, I mean, I'm a lawyer, there were other lawyers in the project, so it made sense for us to keep doing law stuff. But now that we have a proper tech platform, obviously there's still a legal component to the work, so that we have a law firm to have attorney-client privilege and stuff like that. But we're really about doing these hybrid tech law implementations.
Okay, very cool. Okay, so that's on MetaLex. Then there's like Gabe, the missionary in the space. What are your thoughts, first of all, on everything going on in crypto? Second of all, everything going on in crypto in America specifically?
Yeah, I mean, it's been very interesting, like, especially because right now, because I have MetaLex, I'm sort of like independent, right? When I was at Delphi, I had to represent Delphi's interests. I maybe was a little bit
nice.
too independent for their taste and stuff. And now I'm kind of like I almost have to get to be like Mavericky, right? Because there's not many people that I can really piss off with different legal positions. And what's interesting about that is it has actually ended up getting me more access into things that I ever had before, because people are interested to get my ideas and they don't really feel like I have an agenda for a specific client. So I've ended up being, with Trump, I was a big on Trump getting elected, because I was never really big in politics before, but I just really had this set after he made the Bitcoin speech. I was like, wow, he is leaning completely into crypto. And many people thought it was just like, nah, it's just to pick up some extra votes. I was like, no, man, you don't do that if you don't really intend to follow through. And so, I started, big upping Trump, just because I was like, this is going to be our chance to fix crypto law. And it really has happened. And I've gotten to see a lot of, the bill drafts, especially this market structure bill, and just all the people working on it and all the flow. And I'm I'm bullish on this regulation. I'm bullish on this market structure regulation. And obviously I was on an SEC panel. I've been talking to the SEC quite a bit as well. I'm very bullish on what the SEC is doing as well. So this is an exciting time. Yeah, I don't even know where to begin. There's many, many threads to pull on. Maybe you can guide me a bit. But the long story short.
Well, where do you think we're going to see the biggest change?
The biggest change, obviously, is projects are eagerly going to be and launch in the United States end to end, with less decentralization theater, and less evasion and stuff like that, assuming this market structure.
You think that the decentralization theater was just kind of like to get away from the States?
So there's 2 reasons to do all the offshoring, the fancy offshoring stuff, one of which I regard as very legitimate but not very influential, and the other of which I regard as illegitimate but very influential. The illegitimate but very influential one is people somehow thought this meant like U.S. securities laws and U.S. commodities laws don't apply to their project, which is obviously completely incorrect.
That's just complete ignorance. It doesn't have anything to do with like, it wasn't that somebody misrepresented it. It's just like, people hear what they want to hear.
Exactly. And I do think, weirdly enough, that was the most popular reason, even though completely wrong. There's a more legitimate reason, which is tax structuring, right? Because you can, with like selling tokens and stuff like that in the United States, obviously, can be treated as like inventory or something. You can be taxed quite heavily on it, rather than, like it being a capital raise where you're not taxed. And so selling tokens and stuff like that. But so there could be very interesting reasons to use a Cayman Islands foundation or something like that, and maybe you get less tax. But on the other hand, personally, I think most of those would fall apart if they were audited. And so I don't think, but in theory, there can be a good tax optimization strategy. So some of the tax issues will remain, but they were not predominant in most people's thinking for why they were outside the U.S. And the regulatory issues, I think, would be dramatically diminished. So it's just a new cost benefit analysis where probably, assuming this market structure bill passes and assuming the SEC stays friendly and all that, the benefits of being in the US will outweigh, the risks and the costs.
You think that we'll see like banks in the US opening up more or closing? Because I think you're going to see a lot of people who are going to come from outside of the US and incorporate in the US because it's easy to set up a company there. You could set up a Delaware company in like a couple hours. It's like considered like a legitimate jurisdiction to be incorporated in. It's easy to do business in English. The courts are have their head on their shoulders for most cases, and you get access to banking. But I think that the first people who are going to start closing their doors are going to be the banks. Like, and I'm already seeing it. We recently set up for our firm an entity in the US, and like they're giving me such a hard time.
Interesting.
Just because it says crypto law on our website.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, it's a mixed bag, but I think, banks want to do business. So, and personally, I haven't had, like in the last year, like certainly since Trump got elected, but even a bit before that, I mean, there are banks that are open for crypto business. Maybe you have to know somebody, or I don't know, but it's not a problem that currently seems to be looming super large for most people, for what it's worth.
Okay,
but
interesting.
It's all anecdotal, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, my biggest fear is that like people will see, okay, the US is open again, and the SEC has definitely like put down their guns, but maybe even to they've gone too far, and then now you're gonna have a lot of fraudsters coming back in, and rather than seeing like the market correction that we were hoping to see, we're gonna see like a lot more people looking to take advantage of the new situation, and then the regulators
and then a crackdown later. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah. That's certainly a risk. And there was recently, just a week or two ago, there was this guy who got tagged in Florida for being part of basically like evading Russian sanctions while pretending to be a crypto company. Right. I don't know if you read about that. I forgot the name.
I missed that one.
But it was a big, it was a big thing. And so that is certainly a risk. That's why I think it's all predicated on passing this market structure bill, right? Because if the market structure bill passes, then there's going to be certain expectations around disclosure and other things. And I think it suddenly becomes easier to sort legit projects from illegitimate ones, whether it's for banks or investors or whoever. And there's going to be less friendly cover for bad people, in my opinion. Whereas prior to now, if you went to law firm, I won't name the law firms, but there's certain law firms in the space who their standard advice was, don't give any disclosure about your project, because anything you say will be used against you by the SEC to show that you're making efforts. So you basically can't disclose anything. So what that does is it gives a haven to illegitimate actors, right? Because everyone has to say very little, and there's low information. You can't tell the scammers from the non-scammers. If suddenly all the good actors, all the law-abiding actors are all disclosing, that's going to make it much easier to sort it out. Yeah.
Peer pressure in the right direction.
Yeah.
Okay, you've been like quite critical of big law crypto. My partners and I all left big law, kind of recognizing, I worked in M&A and corporate and commercial high tech department, and my partners were in like the financial regulation department doing like crypto kind of stuff. And we both we all kind of got to this conclusion that like big law doesn't work for crypto. And we started like I don't like the word boutique, but it's like a boutique crypto-centric law firm. And I don't think that big law really could cater to crypto for numerous reasons, both because of their internal controls that don't allow them to, think out of the box and creatively enough to be able to help benefit founders who are looking for like real solutions to the fact that they're exposed to multiple regulatory frameworks at any given time.
Yep.
And also because of like costs and other things as well.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd say like big law is actually many things, right? So like one thing that's now included in big law is things that used to be Silicon Valley boutiques like Cooley, Fenwick, Wilson Sonsini, maybe, I don't know, Gunderson, I think would be potentially considered big law now, or Goodwin Procter, more of a Boston startup thing. But, large, somewhat prestigious law firms that cater to startups, right? I still think those have tried to have real crypto practices, and I think they can be good. What I'd say is definitely not good is like go to Davis Polk or like my old firm, Wild Gotchall, because they exist to, they're really for banks, investment banks, M&A, IPOs, these sorts of things. And for something to be material there, the threshold is incredibly high, right? So even if you're willing to pay, obviously there's expense, $2,500 an hour, and massive pyramidal teams that are sort of inefficient and leveraged by design. Even if as just from a cost perspective, as a startup, you should never be doing that, right? Especially like if you haven't found PMF yet. Maybe in your Series A, you start to consider a bigger firm, right? Or more likely Series B, plus. But so there's just the cost factor. But even if for whatever reason you're just crazy and you want to incur those costs, they just don't care about you, right? You're immaterial. If they're making $1 billion, they're making $1 billion a year overall, right? And they're making like $100 million for Microsoft a year. They don't care about you, even if you're paying them what seems like a lot of money to you, like $1 million a year. Right. So, you're just not going to get the love, in my opinion. And you're always, if a hot new deal comes in, they're going to drop you. Your thing gets deprioritized, right? So that's just one of the factors. And then obviously they're not going to take crypto payments, right? If you want to do it, they'll say they take crypto, but that actually means this like centralized service where you get KYC AML and you send the service USDC and they converted it into fiat, right? Whereas me, when I was taking a lot of crypto clients, like, yeah, here's my address, send me USDC.
Here's my address.
Right? Yeah, exactly. And so
what chain do you want to send it on?
Yeah, exactly. And so there's just a lot of, I would say it's a subset of the fact that big law is, generally speaking, a poor choice for any early stage startup, right? But it just gets even more magnified with all the regulatory issues and banking issues and other frictions, and frankly, novel technology of crypto, right? Because for me, I'm sure you do the same. I look at the GitHub of my clients and things like that. I'm really in the weeds and I really understand these systems. And, the typical big law attorney not only doesn't
even know what GitHub is.
Yeah, they don't even think to do it in many cases, and they haven't done it before. Even if they were to try to do it, there's a big learning curve.
Okay. What are your thoughts on people who are not docs in the space? Like, I know it's less and less of a thing of late, but like there are still all these characters in the space, and still every once in a while I see a company that's just kicking off, and I look on the website to see like who the founders are, and it's got some like, I mean,
right.
I know you guys have a little bit of that on your website as well, but not like on not in the founding team,
right.
where you just don't know who the guy is, and they get onto spaces with a mask and like their voice,
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, like the when you said the mask, I started thinking of the MetaDAO guy.
Frank D. Gods? Oh, okay.
Like the MetaDAO guy, he has this, because it literally at conferences, he must have had it custom made. It's actually a beautiful mask, and I think it's pretty cool. But
it is cool.
There's a few, and now, what's interesting is some crypto lawyers are not, right? Like the what I understand of the GC of, there's like two of the really big projects this cycle, I'll just say, have a non-GCs. So it's even infected the lawyering profession.
How does that even work? Like as far as like privilege is concerned, I don't know.
I think there's probably some issues there, but generally speaking, I think that there's a safety issue in crypto. That, like, you can be subject to wrench attacks. Like, there's a lot of security issues in crypto. So there can be some like good rationales to be careful about your identity. What I've personally found is two things. Number one, there is a lot of social capital in people's anon identities, right? Like, let's say someone like Banteg, right? Who I know as Banteg. I don't know who he really is. I've known him for years, right? There is an enormous value and social capital in his account, in his persona, and that can be weighted just as heavily by someone like that as an in real life identity, right? The similar costs if they burn their reputation. Sure, they could start another account, so maybe no one knows who they are and they don't go to jail if they did something really bad, but they're losing something, right, from having to start over again. They're maybe losing a lot. Number two is that in crypto, it's actually a little bit like big law. Almost everyone has a rabbi, at least one rabbi. And so they may not be doxed to you, but they're doxed to someone who's doxed, almost always. And if you want to, like, right now I'm navigating a little bit of a situation because a meme coin arose around me last week. But and so I'm dealing with
Wait a second, what?
Oh,
a
you don't
meme
know
coin
you don't know
arose.
about this. I actually thought you would want to
I
talk
missed
about
that.
this because
I mean,
it's
I
huge.
missed that. We're like dodging bombs from Iran. So I've spent the
Yeah,
last week and
no,
a half
yeah,
at
no.
home with my kids, and
It ran from zero to a 55 million market cap last week off of a meme.
whoa. Okay, so let's
Yeah,
get to that in a second.
yeah. So anyway, so I have to deal with a lot of these anons, right? I have found ways of navigating that. It's not perfect, and I do make mistakes, but you can start to ask around and develop a sort of graph of social proof of an anon person, and you can figure out what is their cost to them if they do something bad, right? And whether they're likely to do something bad. So personally, I'm not. I think there can be good reasons for it, and I think if you're smart about it, you can navigate it. It's really not that different from dealing with dox people at the end of the day, except maybe they're more likely not to go to jail, but they still have a lot to lose from bad behavior, to be honest.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
So you're a lot more favorable than I thought that you'd be. Tell me about this meme coin.
Yeah, well, so it arose from a conversation between me and Anatoly Yakovenko, I think is how you say it, the founder of
Yeah,
Solana.
Yakovenko.
He's for whatever reason he likes to reply to a lot of my posts on X. I don't know why, to be honest. I feel like I'm way below his pay grade, way below. But I'm thankful for it regardless, and I find him interesting. And I was talking about actually a legal issue with contentious hard forks, where if a foundation owns the trademark for, let's just say this happened with Ethereum when it did a contentious hard fork. The Ethereum Foundation owns the trademarks to Ethereum and ETH. And so that is actually a form of power in a contentious hard fork scenario where they can say to exchanges, hey, this token is ETH. And if you call this other token ETH, we're going to sue you.
And you're fired, right?
And that.
So who gave it the name Ethereum Classic? Was that the foundation itself?
I think I don't know if there was some deal that was worked out between the Ethereum Foundation and those guys, but in theory, Ethereum Classic was the actual real original chain. The new one is what ended up going. And in the natural logic,
but it's the trademark holder who determines where the trademark goes to.
Exactly. So that can be very influential. And Tolly kind of replied and said, it doesn't really matter. It's just whatever chain has more economic activity. And I was like, okay, man, but let's just say there were two chains. Solana with the ticker Sol and the logo for Solana, and Gorbajana with the ticker Garbage, with the ticker Gore and the Oscar the Grouch as a logo. With just that information, which one is going to be more valuable? It's pretty obvious to me. It's going to be Solana. And he retweeted that. He said, well, if there's not a Solana fork called Gorbajana in 48 hours, I'll be very disappointed. And instantly, dude, there were like 50 pump fun Gorbajana tokens and chats trying to do a fork and all this stuff. And it ended up turning, and I don't own any of the token, by the way. I'm not trying to get rich off this, but it ended up turning into a big thing. And like the winning one, ran to, I think 55 mil. It's now it's more like 30 mil, 35 mil. And so I literally have been roped into this for the last week or so of people. We forked it. We did actually build a fork. It's testnet fork. And Backpack integrated it. And now people want to make it a real chain and stuff. So I don't know what's going to happen with it, but it's a situation where I suddenly have a lot of anons coming at me.
Memes also.
Yeah, exactly. And so you have to figure out ways. It's almost like a form of street smarts, but for the trenches. And you have to figure out these types of social dynamics. Yeah.
I love it. Awesome. Okay. Let me hit you with let's get a little bit personal if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
Okay. I don't like to assume anything, but your name is Gabe Shapiro. I'm assuming you're Jewish?
My father is Jewish, yes.
Okay. I mean, you can't, with the name Shapiro, not be Jewish.
That's right.
So, we're in a bit of a situation here in Israel now. Yes. We managed to drag the United States into it to some extent. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm not privy to whatever intelligence information is involved.
As an American person, as an American citizen, who.
But I mean, well, to me, as an American person, obviously, I support the United States, its strategic interests, and Israel is an ally of ours. Iran is obviously under its current regime, I think despotic and oppresses its own people, and as a government, has antipathy and is an enemy of the United States and Israel, right? So to me, that's the dynamic. Whether the best strategy is the U.S. going in and doing these military interventions. Trump did not run on that. So that is one thing, right? It's very much make America great again, domestic focus.
Yeah. I think the question is like, does attacking Iran go against an America first approach?
I mean, I do think it's a little bit of a violation of the social covenant that he ran on. That doesn't mean I'm personally against it, because I have, I'm a broader person than that. But I could see why many people who voted for Trump could potentially feel like betrayed by that or not like that, for sure. Yeah. And that is happening. A lot of alt-right
because he's seen as warmongering, even though he said like, we're just going to focus on building a home.
That's right. So I get why it's controversial, and it could honestly, from a crypto perspective, it's dangerous if we think like, okay, MAGA is the crypto champion, then you don't like internal division in MAGA, because it makes it less likely that MAGA will have power in.
Yeah, I was surprised. I would have thought that the markets would have reacted differently.
Right.
Yeah. But I don't know. I guess we'll wait and see. But I feel like not having boots on the ground is like different.
That's true.
It's different.
That's a bit of a dividing line. You're exactly right.
And hopefully we keep it that way.
Yeah.
Have you been to Israel?
You know what? I never did the birthright trip, and I really regret it. But I was like a communist when I was young. So like, I had it was like I'm 43 years old, right? I'm a little older than I look, I think. And so when I was in college was the Iraq War, and I was almost like, I would say my mentality was similar to like Weather Underground or something like that leftist. And so the last thing I wanted to go was like Israel. If this war were happening now and I was young, I would probably be like pro-Palestine or something, right? And I've never done it, but I want to do it. I just never.
So why not come, man?
What do you think? Where do you think I should do it? And have you done it?
I mean, I live in Israel.
Oh, you live in Israel. Yeah, you live in Israel. Okay, got it.
I live in Israel. I grew up in Jersey, actually. I moved here when I was 14. My parents like dragged me here, but it's the best thing that they,
Where did you grow up in Jersey?
Teaneck.
Okay, got it. Okay, I shifted into thinking of you as American because you do have the American accent. But yes, okay, got it. And you are American. So you are American.
I live in Israel. I serve in the IDF reserves. Like I'm a lawyer for the IDF. So
wow.
Been doing almost 2 years straight of reserve duty. So yeah, I'm very much like in this war thing.
And so I mean, man, you're in harm's way. Have you been watching Gainsey?
We're on some of the same crypto chats locally.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I mean, that is a very unique intersection of these things where Gainsey is streaming on pump.fun, being in, shelters while getting bombed. That's like just an intense social flashpoint for crypto. And yeah, man, I hope you guys are safe, and I really wish the best for you guys. Yeah.
Come and visit. Seriously,
when this dies down,
politics aside, it's a great country. Like it's a beautiful country. The beaches are great. The hikes are great. I don't know what your vibe is, but like there's something for everyone. So
it's great.
Definitely put it on your list.
And you'll buy me a drink when I'm there.
I will buy you multiple drinks.
Awesome.
Coffee and beer. And there's a great like whiskey bar here and like this old Templar building underground. Like
that's right. Awesome.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Code. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, share with your friends, and to tune in again next week for more fun and insightful conversation.